Mary, it's great to see some familiar faces here. So let me just start off by introducing myself. My name is Diana Toledo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am on staff here at River Network. I am the Senior Director of River Programs, and I am joined by Brenna Goggin, who is on camera. And I'll be doing the introductions, and Brenna will be doing work on the back end of the webinar. Hey, Sarah, welcome. So just a couple of housekeeping items. If you could keep yourself on mute, just to manage the background noise. We do have closed captioning turned on. So if you want to go ahead and if that would be useful, go ahead and turn it on for yourself. Yeah, please, if you're just joining, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat would be great. So we are key principles of collaborative fundraising. That's today's session. Welcome. This session is hosted by the Urban Waters Learning Network. And so if you're new to the Learning Network, if you want to next, Jorie. The Urban Waters Learning Network is a peer-to-peer network of community organizations and of people who are working on urban waterways across the country. And so we do a lot of support, capacity building support to help members of that network advance their work in across a number of different areas, including the area of fundraising, which is what brings us here today. The Learning Network is funded by EPA and National Park Service, and we are deeply grateful for their support. You want to go next? So just to introduce the topic, collaborative fundraising. I mean, I think we have all been extremely excited and also challenged by the new federal funding landscape in that there are so many funding opportunities coming through federal government. Although we are not, our session today is not just going to limit itself on the federal government, but one of the key elements of a lot of those funding opportunities is that the dollar amounts that are coming down are big dollar amounts. One opportunity that's open right now, for example, is the community change grants, and some of the targeted projects sizes are between $10 and $20 million. And so what we're finding is that projects of that scale and of that scope really require partnerships in order to be able to deliver them. And in fact, for some of these funding opportunities, partnerships are a required component of even applying for those funds. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting members of our network to just navigate the process to work with other entities to apply for the funding. It's something that many of our organizations have done. Some of us have had an easier time than others. There are oftentimes just challenges and curves in the process and ways that we can do things maybe better for next time. So that at the end of a funding proposal process, whether or not we are selected to be awarded, that those relationships really are stronger than when we start in this process. And so keeping that first and foremost about what those relationships look like and how we can approach a collaborative funding process in a way that that really is as smooth as we can hope for. And so this session today builds on some of the work that we have led through the Urban Waters Learning Network to help some of our members navigate some of the federal funding databases. We have shared and compiled a lot of resources related to tapping into federal funding. And so Brenda's going to drop a link into the chat here for a website where you can see some of that work. So before we go ahead and get started, I just want to get a sense of who's in the room. So Brenna's going to pull up a poll just to understand a little bit of what your experience is with collaborative fundraising. You should see that up on your screen now. So if you might just take a minute to respond to that poll, that would be great. So where are you currently in collaborative fundraising? I guess, yeah, we have just the one poll question at this point.
We do, and we have about half the folks participating at the moment.
Let's just give it a few more seconds here. Okay, we've got almost everybody responding. Let's give it one more second. I'm going to count us back. 3, 2, 1. If you want to go ahead and close the poll, Brenna, and pull up the results. So you can see there are entities here at all stages of the process. About a quarter of you have never applied for funding with another entity. Others, about 13%, are identifying partners. Half of you are currently developing project ideas. That's great to hear. And about 20% of you are drafting a narrative and a budget, are actually actively putting together proposals. It's great to see that a third of you say you're doing this all the time successfully. There's this sliver of folks who have challenging experience perhaps where it didn't go well. Would love to hear more as we go through today's session about what was part of that and how we can learn from each other's experiences. So thank you for that. All right, let's close that poll. And so with that, I want to just encourage everybody, drop questions into the chat. We'll be monitoring, we'll be bringing them to Jorie's attention here over the session. So if you want to hit next, Jorie, I want to introduce Jorie. We've had the opportunity at River Network to work with Jorie for many years. She was formerly on staff, on our fundraising staff. She is currently supporting our fundraising efforts as a contractor. And Jorie brings over 15 years of experience fundraising and has raised millions of dollars for many different organizations in the field of conservation. She has a PhD from Ohio State University, and her research actually looked into emerging trends in philanthropy, and she has taught courses in nonprofit management and nonprofit fundraising. Jorie is joining us from rural Northern California. And so without further ado, I want to turn it to Jorie, and just looking forward to today's session. Thank you all. And just, again, I'm going to take myself off camera, but drop questions into the chat so we can make this an interactive experience. Thanks. Jorie?
Yeah, thank you, Deanna. And welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. And thanks for River Network and the Urban Waters Learning Network for hosting this session. Today, we're going to be talking about collaborative fundraising. Bit of an overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about why we collaborate, the different reasons that bring partners together, and how we might go about fundraising together. We're going to talk about how we build trust and maintain trust in our partnerships. We're going to talk about different collaboration structures that are going to help us work better together. We're going to touch on a little bit of prospect research and how we're going to find funding opportunities. And we've got some case studies that we'll touch on, and we'll have some small group breakout sessions. So everyone will have a chance to connect with some other attendees and share some stories about what's working for you in your partnerships and collaborations. So why collaborate anyways, right? One reason that we find many collaborations coming together is to scale efforts. We want to have more impact, we want to accomplish more mission, transform our communities in an even bigger way, and improve more people's lives. And we can do that better when we're partnering with other organizations to do that. We're able to tackle more complex issues, bringing in stakeholders with different expertise to coordinate efforts and have even more impact. We're able to lean into the strengths of our partners. You know, not every organization can do every part of a project, might not have the capacity and the expertise. And so, you know, we look to our partners to help strengthen our programs and to bring some streamlining into some of the operations around a project. We're able to create better and bigger coalitions that increase influence when we partner across sectors. So nonprofits partnering with municipalities and local and state governments, and in the for-profit sector as well. And so we see that coalition building as a big part of collaboration work. And then finally, in kind of a flipping the whole thing on its head, sometimes we find that we build collaborations in response to a specific funding opportunity. We see this grant opportunity that just looks amazing, and it inspires folks to want to work together so that they can apply for that grant funding. And so we're going to talk about both of those. It's sometimes a chicken and an egg situation. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. So before we dive in, I would like to ground our conversation a bit in trust building and reciprocity. And to do that, I want to introduce a movement, community-centric fundraising, that I discovered a few years ago. If you're not familiar, Brenna is going to drop a link in the chat to their web page, and they are a fundraising model that is grounded in equity and social justice. They have a lot of resources, one of which is their 10 principles of community fundraising. And for the purpose of collaboration, I want to really highlight their principles number 2 and number 3. Of their 10 principles, their principle number 2 is individual organizations' missions are not as important as the collective community. And so we can see that as, a principle that we might want to hold up and remind ourselves of as we are, working towards collaboration. And then principle number 3 is nonprofits are generous with and mutually supportive of one another. So often, and I've experienced this in my nonprofit work, things can start feeling competitive with other nonprofits. Quite literally, we're often competing for grant dollars, and there's only so much to go around. So if we can think through, another way to look at it would be to really focus on how you might be generous with, not competitive with, and supportive of the other organizations working in your space. And we're going to revisit some of the trust building throughout the session today, but I really just wanted to start with that in mind. All right. So as we consider launching a partnership, it's so important to have clarity on what your project is, what the partnerships are, like what is this collaboration and the scope of your collaboration. So which comes first? The big vision? Is there a shared sort of expansive and inspiring plan for something in your community's future that would be stronger if you have partnerships across different organizations and sectors and things? Or perhaps there's a specific project that is more defined, might have more of a specific timeline and a specific objective. Or again, is it in response to a funding opportunity and the opportunity to, really bring revenue into the project that you are interested in? Brenna is we're going to look at the chat now to see if anyone has any examples of which came first, the big vision for your community, a specific project, or responding to a funding opportunity. So if you want to jump into the chat and share if you have any examples from your work.
So we've had vision seems to be top one. For Larry, all three came together in a beautiful rainbow. Any other folks want to jump in on the chat? Thank you, Catherine. Come on, Larry, it's a gray overcast day here. We need rainbows. We need some color and sunshine.
Well, thanks for chiming in there. And I'm sure as we continue on, maybe some additional thoughts will come to you around which for you came first. So now that you want to collaborate, one of those things has spurred the interest in collaboration. The next thing oftentimes that we think about is what each partner is bringing to the table. Who's doing what in this collaboration? And so we'll see oftentimes that, collaborations are strengthened by the staff, the funding, the staff capacity that they're lending to the work for fundraising and for the implementation of the project. Some partners will have really strong financial systems that will help manage grants and manage the funds that will be coming in. Some partners have the equipment and the facilities and maybe the field, the field equipment and things that you might need to actually get the job done out in the field. And some partners will help you be eligible for more funding. As we've seen, oftentimes a grant will require that the lead applicant is a nonprofit organization. Or sometimes the lead applicant needs to be a municipality. And so if you have a sort of cross-sector group coming together to collaborate, chances are one of you partners will be eligible and could be the lead on the grant that you're looking at. And then also providing letters of support. This is something that every partner can bring to the table. I do want to note, though, that only writing a letter of support maybe doesn't make you a collaborator in the sense that we're talking about today. We're really looking for very substantive partnerships. Writing a letter, it definitely goes a long way and is very supportive. But we're looking more for the deeper engagement in their collaborations. All right, so collaborating for success. Today we're going to talk about 3 different elements that might help you frame up your collaboration and so you're set up for success: structure, capacity, and culture. And Brenna has some more links to share in the chat. These are from Bridgespan. Website is fantastic for resources on all kinds of nonprofit management topics. But this framing of collaboration is from them. And so if you are interested in hearing more about what we're talking about today on this topic, definitely take a look at what they've got on their website. So before we jump into structure, I think we're going to have a poll.
We sure are. We have a question if the slides will be made available. The recording definitely will be made available, and typically with that recording is a PDF of the slides. So thank you, Larry, for the question. And we have our second poll up.
So if you were going to partner, if you are currently partnering with other organizations on fundraising, who are you partnering with?
Oh,
there's 2 questions in the poll, so please scroll down to see both questions in the poll.
Yeah. Thank you, Deanna.
And this first one is check all that apply. And then when you scroll down, number 2 is who do you want to be partnering with, but you aren't yet?
Was the partner, does the partner have to be paid, or are they listed as a partner? Like if
I would
it's
say, yeah,
a government entity, but you don't, like, doesn't accept funding, but they're your partner. Does that count?
I would say it does.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's give it another minute. So it looks like most folks are partnering with other nonprofits, some with community-based organizations and local government, even fewer with educational institutions. And tribal governments, and the fewest with public utilities. And when we see who folks want to be partnering with, community-based organizations is leading the poll there, and then educational institutions.
And then for another, we had foundations, for-profit entities also come into the mix.
Great. Great, well, thanks for sharing, everybody. Let me get back to my notes. All right, so we're going to talk about each of these 3 elements. First, we're going to talk about structure. Oftentimes, we're going to see a lead organization driving the vision and the management of the collaboration. Lead convener. We also may have a steering committee of other lead individuals, and then maybe some subcommittees dedicated to specific activities and topics. There might be a set of broader partners in the collaboration that have less of a leadership role, but are still bringing something to the table. Alternately, we've seen hub and spoke variation of collaboration where there's a lead organization that the full set of partners do not meet. The lead organization is really working independently with each partner. And that sometimes can offer a simple sort of governance structure and more centralized resources, but may lose the benefits of all the partners engaging with each other. So the structure is really going to shape how decisions are made for the collaboration. It may be formalized and documented, the structure and the different processes of your decision making and things like that, with a memorandum of understanding. And then another facet to consider with the structure of your collaboration is the expected lifespan of your collaboration, your vision, your project. Is this a very tactical partnership with clear and immediate objectives, or is this a more longer visioning, process-oriented project? And you can outline what you expect might be the lifespan as you're setting things up with your partners. And it may change over time, of course. The next element that we're going to talk about is capacity and the roles that support the collaboration. You've got that leader and convener role, bringing key leaders to the collaboration and moving the group towards cohesive, collective, strategic directions. This role is one that has significant administrative capacity and the resources for the collaboration. It's important to think about selecting a lead convener that has the trust and the respect of the community, one that might be both sufficiently neutral and have the ability to convene a broad group of decision makers in your community. Oops. Director and facilitator. So this is going to be a role in the collaboration that manages the day-to-day work to support the collaborative. They're accountable for getting things done in between meetings, guiding the collaborations meetings with an eye toward moving the group towards consensus, if that's your decision-making process and action. And this person is going to have strengths and experience in strategic planning and stakeholder management. You may have a role that is specifically focused on data, supporting data collection and analysis, finding trends, reporting back to the group. And sometimes this is a role that is outsourced to researchers or outside firms, depending on the project. You may have a role of policy analyst, and this is someone in your collaboration that's monitoring policy news and changes that would be relevant to your work. Thinking about those points where you might be wanting to increase your influence, reporting back to the collaboration on different policy wins and obstacles, and really helping the group determine opportunities to have influence on those policy decisions. Of course, collaborations need administrative support, coordinating meetings across the collaborative, including agendas and minutes and file management and things like that. And then you may have like an external relations function, communications and development, fundraising to really maximize the impact and maintain and develop relationships with funders. A key point on all of this is that these roles are often combined. You may have a small collaboration with fewer individuals involved. And so you're going to figure out what are the most important roles and where these might be combined. Some other important considerations when launching a new collaboration, and this is where sometimes things can get sticky. And so it's just good to know what kinds of conversations you might want to be having early on with your partners. Do you need to identify dedicated funding to support your earliest work before you get grant funding in the door? Who's paying your staff to attend meetings and to be prospect researching and to be writing the first, proposal that's going to get the project going, but you don't have that funding in hand yet. And so to identify that funding, you might have a conversation with your partners on whether any of them have existing funders who'd be interested in providing that funding. And then, of course, how will the partners share their existing donor lists and relationships? And these can be hard conversations to have because of, some of the ways that we get stuck in nonprofits around scarcity mentality. And so, I'd encourage everybody to consider those community-centric principles that we chatted about in the beginning of this call. It can help with thinking about this work and collaborations as being about abundance and sharing and not scarcity. So yeah, that would be an important thing to consider there. And this kind of flows over into the third element of culture. We've talked about structure, we've talked about capacity. Finally, we're going to chat about culture here in your collaboration. And this would be the norms and values in your collaboration. Your partnerships may have a range of formality, maybe very casual or very formal in your meetings and your communications and interactions. But always a good point to take time early on to identify your shared values. This is also trust building work. And commit to transparency and authenticity in how you personally and how your organization shows up to this collaboration. And have no hidden agendas. It's not going to serve anybody if you're not just transparent about what your needs are and what your motivations are. All right, so now that we have, you're clear about why you're collaborating, you've got your structure, capacity, culture is all on track. It's time to do the work, secure some money to support your work and your collaborations, visions. So let's talk about project management and how we're all going to apply for these grants together. We're going to define some roles and responsibility in this project, in the management of this project. And a lot of this work has already been done as you've been setting your structure and considering your capacity. You're going to discuss and agree about expectations. What kinds of grants would you pursue? What size awards are you looking to secure, and so forth? Good idea to agree about the kinds of tools and platforms you're going to use to communicate internally. Google Drive is nice, and there are some other products that are really easy to share files for getting feedback and getting review and so forth. You're going to define the process for reviewing and getting that feedback before you submit a grant. Who in your collaboration needs to review final drafts of things? And you're going to identify all of that as you're setting up your process. And then it wouldn't be project management if we didn't have timelines, right? So you're going to create and adhere to timelines as they relate to the grant application deadlines that you're working towards, or maybe some other important project milestones that you've got. And so I'm going to hand it over to Deanna to do a little bit of a deep dive on a recent River Network proposal process that was deeply collaborative.
River Network just went through a collaborative proposal writing process that was probably the best shared process that I have ever been part of, and we were not the lead, so I want to give credit to the Institute for Sustainable Communities who led us through that. So you may have seen a press release somewhere along the line. River Network is part of a group that came together under the leadership of Institute for Sustainable Communities. We applied for the EPA Environmental Justice Thriving Communities program as a national grant maker. So we were awarded that grant. It is a $50 million re-granting program. And so the process came together quite quickly because the opportunity was, as many are right now, was put out by EPA, and the turnaround was quite quick. And so some of the key takeaways that I think I know we are studying the whole process that we followed so that we can incorporate it internally into our own grant writing process and when we work with others. And so I think the first step was the lead organization, ISC, Institute for Sustainable Communities, just assessed the funding opportunity and started to think about a strategy for how to shape a project to respond to it, and started to think about what kind of team they wanted to pull together to really, that would be more likely to succeed. So, there's specific components about national reach and organizations that focus on water and on workforce development, et cetera, et cetera. They sort of assess how the points were going to be awarded, what the expertise is that they needed, and then started to recruit others of us to join that team. And so that process started off with just initial exploratory conversations. And because this is an environmental justice program, it really their first filter was, are we aligned on our values? Is this, we did not have a pre-existing relationship with Institute for Sustainable Communities. We did with a lot of the other partners. And so I think for them, it was just making sure that we were really values aligned, both so that we could both work better together in the application process, but that we could really trust each other to have, be guided by the same values as we were implementing the project. And so those were the initial conversations. And then from there, they invited some of us to formally be part of that team. The lead organization brought a designated grant writer, and they assigned a staff lead to manage and coordinate the whole process, and they convened our team. And one of the first things that they did once that team was defined is they put forward a quick survey for us to fill out. Gets to what Jorie was outlining of what are the skills and what are the systems, what are the expertise that the different players bring to the table. And so they collected all of that information with a simple survey. It explored what was our interest in being part of this process and this project, what was our relevant experience, how are we envisioning delivering on this work, just really giving us a chance to make the case for why this was aligned with the kind of work we do and why we had strengths to bring to it. We also identified some of the resources that we could bring, the skills, the staff, the networks. And then using that information, literally the grant writer took the first stab, the grant writer, at putting together a proposal. Just really, really rough, a real broad outline. And as that was coming together, we put in place some memorandums of understanding, signed agreements that just articulated our commitments to each other. So in this case, it was River Network and the lead organization. They signed an agreement with each of our partners. And it was just outlining some of the things that are oftentimes assumed, but it's good to have them out in the open, non-extractive relationships, mutual respect, mutual benefit. We were committed to actual, tangible outcomes and impact on the ground. So maybe reflecting some of the thinking in the community-centric fundraising philosophy and principles that Jorie shared. And so then we went into an iterative process. We did, there was a big calendar with milestones. Like I said, the deadline for submitting a proposal was pretty quick. And so, they came in with like an iterative review process and milestones and deadlines along the way. Some of us splintered off in subgroups when there were thornier aspects of the proposal that we wanted to just make sure we knew what we wanted to propose and we're on the same page. So there were some ad hoc groups that came together to just clarify our thinking around maybe as the evaluation strategy or the outreach strategy. And so we were providing text and to add to that draft. And the thing that maybe was most helpful was just the review process. They created 2 separate review teams. One included all of the program staff. And then they created a second team that did the second layer of reviews that was our fundraising staff. And so the first review team, we were just looking at draft after draft and submitting comments using a very clear process with a spreadsheet, with a tab in the spreadsheet for every objective and set of activities where we could provide input into the draft so we weren't creating a crazy document with too many cooks in the kitchen that then is really hard to navigate. So that was the first level, just program staff looking at substance. And once we were done with that, then they brought in the folks who know how to look at a proposal, the grant writers themselves who are like, are we maximizing the points? Are we addressing all of the key bullets that they want us to address? And they did a similar second stage process. The budgeting question, just finally here, was really interesting when you're trying to figure out a budget for a $50 million project. That can be fraught with, just real tense conversations. And so the way that this organization approached it is they asked each partner, once that proposal was done, is, okay, what you've committed to as part of this. Tell us how much, what your budget, what you need over the next 3 to 4 years to deliver on this work. And so we put forth what we thought was a budget for River Network's share. And then it was a bit of a negotiation with them, which honestly, because it was built on trust, it was a super easy process to determine, what each of our organizations, how we would be integrated into the budget. So I think the whole process lasted maybe all of when we came in, maybe 5 weeks, honestly, for what was a very complex federal funding opportunity. And I will say that even after going through that process, before we were notified that we were awarded, it felt like a huge success just in what we learned and the trust that we built with the partners at the table. And it was about as smooth as a process as I could have envisioned. And I wasn't aware of like to what extent it incorporated a lot of the things that Jorie is covering here. So if anybody would like to talk further about that or get more input on sort of how we approached it, I would love to talk more and help just spread this approach to other organizations so we can all benefit from it. Thanks, Jorie.
Thanks, Deanna. And if anyone has questions for Deanna or questions about that project, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end with some Q&A. So it sounds like, you know, in building all that trust with the partners, there was a lot of good work around internal communications on that project. Great to establish and, you know, a set schedule of meetings, discuss expectations for internal communications early on. What kind of meetings will you be having in person or virtual, or what could be handled over email? And then, like I mentioned before, make sure that you're establishing some kind of document management system so that you know things aren't going to get stuck in the ether and you can't access the file that you need to when you need to. Okay, so now we're going to dive into some budget talk. A few things here. You know, if I can suggest that, if possible, the lead organization that you've identified within your structure would be the lead applicant when you're applying for a grant, and that they would be managing the award and managing the funds as they come in. That would be one of their main responsibilities, that they would have the capacity to do those sorts of things, and why they would be chosen as the lead organization. They would then subcontract or subaward to the various partners and other contractors according to the project. And then just a tip personally, I like to start with the budget when I'm working on a new grant application before I even write any narrative. I find that this helps guide everything about the way that I'm thinking about what would be included in the application. And also so helpful when you're thinking about multiple partners, individual pieces, and subcontracts. If every organization is creating their own little budget and then bringing it back to the lead for that negotiation, as Deanna was mentioning, best to do that beginning before you've written all this beautiful narrative about what's included in your project, I think. And I've got some general good practices in grant writing, but I think that they're especially applicable to grant writing in partnership with other organizations. So just a reminder to many of you that do this work all the time, some cost principles for each expense that you're including. You know, is it reasonable? Do the amounts make sense? Are you budgeting too high or low for the scope of your project? Is the expense necessary? Do you really need the expense to accomplish your work? And is it allowable? Does the funder, you know, is this the kind of thing that's going to be restricted or limited by the funder? Lots of grants allow overhead, and this is something that has some fun twists when you're working in partnerships. So overhead might also be known as indirect costs or facilities and administrative costs. You know, this would include all of the support work that's happening that might not be captured in the direct project costs. So, you know, your finance staff, your accounting staff, your audit, your IT and technology staff, your facilities support, human resources, executive management, and other shared resources that are not, you know, directly attributed to the project, legal support. Good to be very transparent with your partners about where this money is going if you're the lead organization. And then also, get clear with your own finance staff and then the finance or whoever is working on the budget within your partners about your federally negotiated indirect cost rate if you're applying for a federal grant. Does your organization have a NICRA? Do your partners have NICRAs? And so that indirect cost rate is a formal written agreement between your organization and its cognizant federal agency. So that would be the agency that provides most of the funding for the type of work that you do. And in many cases, the lead organization, if they have a NICRA rate, they would use it in their grant proposal. But you also must accept any of your sub-awardees. So if you're passing money through your organization as the lead to your partners, if your partners have their own NICRAs, then those would be rolled up into the budget as well. And so just something to flag and consider with your finance staff. In-kind contributions, a great way to bring in non-cash resources into your project. And you can imagine all of the different non-cash resources that a bunch of partners might be able to bring to the table. But just a quick reminder to make sure that you're balancing any of those in-kind contributions with the respective expense that would be hitting the project. So say a partner is providing necessary field equipment to the project, and this would appear as in-kind revenue. They're donating the equipment to the project as well as an expense. You would have to purchase that if it wasn't being donated.
Hey, Jorie, we have a question in the chat.
Oh, sure.
I just wanted to bring your attention. So Emily shared that she is often helping organizations with the grant writing process, but she's not getting that much, if any, financial support. Do you have advice on managing part of this process, especially when the grant funding is not guaranteed? So she's doing a lot of the grant writing, but uncertain about the budget. Any advice on how to navigate that piece?
Yeah. So if supporting that work, that part of that person's role, I would say, if it can't be a direct line item in a budget for a grant, which oftentimes grant writers are not, of course, then we would need to be looking for more unrestricted sources of revenue to cover that work. And parts of which could be also included in that indirect cost that we shared a few slides ago. Yeah, I guess I would probably be curious to know a little bit more about the other funding, the other revenue streams that organization has, because that would probably have to get covered out of more of an unrestricted pot of money. But maybe we can, okay, sorry, I'm in the chat. I'm seeing a follow-up. More about reciprocity between organizations of different sizes and power dynamics. That's a great topic.
And we had another question in there about power dynamics too, of like, this makes a lot of sense when you're the lead organization, but what about for those organizations that are more in that supporting role or on the receiving end? So if you have communication tips, ways to approach that, and we can also turn to folks in the training as well.
Yeah, if anyone has had recent experience that they'd love to share about any of these topics, please feel free to respond to other attendees in the chat as well. I have been a part of collaborations both as the lead and as very much a broader partner in coming to the collaboration with from an organization that just didn't have a lot of capacity to offer. And I think one of the lessons I learned was to just be very upfront about needs very early on. We would love to be a part of this. We need XYZ to bring, our staff into, committing to this work. And a lot of it was, staff support for that work. Yeah, power dynamics are inherent, right? And a lot of this work in collaborations it's not going to be an even playing field. Like all the partners are going to have different kinds of assets and resources to bring to the table. But I think, yeah, coming with a lot of transparency about your needs early on may help. Anyone have any other thoughts?
Just like recognizing that oftentimes, especially if it's the funding opportunity that is sort of out there and you're responding to it, as opposed to, the first, you're just understand that the bigger vision is going to take multiple partners to carry out. It's easy to get driven by the by the deadline. And before you know it, you're sort of in a runaway train, pace of work to get the proposal in order to meet that deadline. And so just really want to encourage folks. I think it is about upfront communication and making your needs clear and sort of pausing like at the very beginning of a process and understand like these are the assets, these are the skills that we bring to the table. This is why we bring a lot of value. And then these are also our needs and our constraints. So we cannot take the lead on drafting the narrative, or we cannot, we can go chase down, whatever budget cost estimates or letters of support, but we cannot take this piece on. And just sort of have that conversation as you're talking about what the value that you bring, also the constraints that you're working within, and see if you can kind of generate a conversation that is really based in transparency and trust about how you can work together and what feels fair and feasible. And Dr. Chalk, do you have a response? Would love to hear your experience.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. This is referring back to the grant writer question. So while most grants don't allow for grant writers to be compensated, however, if they're providing technical assistance with compiling that grant, that is an indirect cost to the organization, whether it's formatting or getting the basis of a narrative down and or budgeting, if they have expertise in providing that technical assistance in most cases. And you have to look at that that notice of funding or request for proposal, or even a CEA, to see if that is a compensatable task. And so I would just tell folks, and I say this all the time, read the proposal, read it again, read it a third time, and then have someone else on your team look at that proposal 3 times as well, and then come together to discuss it, because everyone is going to get a different perspective based on their expertise.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Absolutely.
If I might jump in on that, just with that very complex EPA proposal, where we did, a version of what Dr. Chalk just suggested, we actually created a spreadsheet, again, like pulling out the important elements, the points that were, that were given for each criteria, and had a really careful, with a fine-tooth comb, looked at all of the details that were included in that notice of funding, because it's true, different people look at it and pick up different components as important. And so having a place where it's actually written out your analysis of what's important can be super helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Deanna. So cost match or cost share, is often a requirement for a particular funding opportunity, but it's great for collaborations. You can show how each partner is contributing something tangible to the project. And, as I'm thinking through this particular slide, these power dynamics, and, it's all, in the mix as far as different capacities of different organizations. But, how many of us have applied for a grant where it's like, 25% required in cost match to show in your budget, or so forth. So it can be mandatory or it can be optional as far as what the funder is requiring. And they may require cash as your match or in kind as your match. And again, this I think is a place where collaborations really have an advantage in this element, because you're able to tap into the capacities of a bunch of different organizations as opposed to just your own. Be sure that if the funder requires cost match, that if you want to apply in kind, so a non-cash contributions, that's allowable. And yeah, just something to keep in mind. And then a few other just general writing tips. When you're working with a bigger group or folks that are going to have different phases of their review, I would suggest considering, copying every element of the proposal application into some kind of shareable document with the word or character limits, and working, there, and then whoever is in charge of submitting the actual proposal would copy it back over into the grant portal or whatever you're being requested, however the application is being accepted. Another good practice when you're working with multiple partners would be to request in advance, especially if you're going to be applying for multiple different kinds of funding from different funders, some of the standard grant components. If you could get those from all partners in advance, it just kind of makes things a little more streamlined later on, especially if you can get, the vetted official mission statement, organizational history, staff bios, and different files and things that will just be easy for whoever's submitting to just grab them out of their file document. And then especially if you're applying for multiple applications, to keep that file of vetted boilerplate text for your future applications. And then to share and recycle good text. I'm like the queen of copy and paste for grant writing, and would suggest that's a good way to approach that. So a few different resources for prospect research. Where are we going to find those funding opportunities? Brenna's got that link again to River Network's compilation of all the useful federal funding databases and technical assistance and different resources. Of course, grants.gov, and you can subscribe to many agencies' RFPs, or different email subscriptions and things where they would announce RFPs. And then, of course, there are some paid subscriptions for receiving grant notifications and RFPs. Foundation Directory Online and Instrumental, I think, are really top notch. I've used them both. They're all quite expensive. And so this would be a case where maybe one of your partners has access and, would bring that as something that they're bringing to the table, is their subscription to one of these services, so that you could scan and do your prospect research that way. Or perhaps you want to share the cost and all of you pitch in for that service. So identifying and assessing opportunities, this can be work that is shared, across the different partners. As any of us in a collaboration are coming across funding opportunities, to know that you can, share that with your partners, I think is a really great resource. And And then, you know, who's making the decisions on whether a funding opportunity is a good fit? Is it worth the risk? How competitive is the grant? Are you eligible? What partners might you need to engage to have eligibility for the grant? You know, and then weighing that, like how risky is it? Is it worth your time? You know, how large is the award? Sort of in contrast to how competitive it may be to get it. Worth the effort, worth the risk. And then I encourage everyone to, you know, attend the informational webinars that the funding agencies are putting out. So often you'll find out so much more information about how to make your application really successful. Hang on, my slide is stuck. There we go. Okay, so we do have some group work here. So Brenna is going to break everyone into pairs, and we'll have 10 minutes to chat about what has worked well in your various collaborations, what challenges have you faced, and what has kept you from collaborating with others. We do have some slides where you can drop in some notes. So Brenna's going to share the slides if you want to open those up, and we're going to shift the share screen over to those slides. So as you're chatting in your pairs, you can make notes, and then we'll all be able to see the little sticky notes. And if you have questions, just take yourself off mute and let us know. Does that sound good?
Some folks will be in groups of 3. You'll actually have about 12 minutes with your group because we're going to combine this and make it just one breakout room, Jorie. But you should have plenty of time to ask any questions that you have outstanding. The links are and the questions are in the chat. Certainly use the toolbar, Zoom toolbar, if you need to get a hold of any of us. With that, enjoy your conversation. Hey, B, I'm happy to put you in a breakout room if you would like. Otherwise, I figured you just want to hang out with us.
Thank you. I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured.
Fortunately, as we often see, we just lost a whole lot of people as soon as we took them into small groups. Dang it.
Let's see.
Because it also happened right at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, we only have 4 people.
Oh, gosh.
Wait, is that even
2
right?
rooms. 2 rooms.
2 rooms.
Okay.
So wait, do we have a timer here?
Thanks, Brenna.
Yep.
Well, for the last few minutes of our session, we're going to review a couple of case studies, and then we're going to go back to those slides that everybody just contributed to. And if everyone's willing to come on camera, we can just kind of have a group Q&A and just kind of chat through some of those issues. So I wanted to bring in a couple of case studies, in addition to Deanna's example of the EPA grant that River Network worked on, that are local to my community. Circle, the South Yuba River Citizens League, is one of California's largest and I would say most robust watershed organizations. They're a longtime River Network member. Former employer of mine. I'm not there anymore, but a great team. And I did not work on these projects, but I am grateful for the staff there that gave me the update on what's going on with these 2 projects that are very collaborative. The first is the Van Norden Meadow Restoration. And this is a collaboration that Circle is the acronym, by the way. It's pronounced Circle, SYRCL. Circle is the lead on this collaboration. It's a 500-acre meadow restoration in the headwaters of the South Yuba River, the South Yuba River in the Sierra Nevada. Its partners are very diverse. The Tahoe National Forest, a land trust, 2 county governments, a railroad, utilities, the local tribe, the Washoe, in addition to some for-profit entities that have an interest there. There's just a complex stakeholder infrastructure relationships. There was some land transfers between the land trust and conservation easements, and a ski resort that has a lot of interest in this area for recreation. And so Circle has done a phenomenal job of leading this collaboration. It's long-term. It's one of the sort of key restoration projects in their whole watershed portfolio. They are securing and managing $12 million, and they are subcontracting a lot of work to partners and different contractors to make this restoration possible. All the partners send relevant RFPs to the organization. So they are sort of fed all of these funding opportunities all the time, and Circle's leading the charge on vetting and then applying and securing the funds for this. They had to do a lot of work to build trust very early on and throughout the project so far. There was some distrust with some of the partners, just really competing needs and desires for what different partners' visions were for this restoration project. And Circle found that one of the things that they had, in addition to being the lead, was access to a lot of science and data about the hydrology and all of the different restoration elements. And so they were able to help guide the conversation and help make decisions and help get consensus among the various partners that were having some issues, because they were able to point to real data, real science to help lead the way there. And then another project that they're working on is the North Yuba Forest Partnership. And this is a project that is winning awards. It's sort of seen as this important model in California and across the West for forest health. It started with a big vision to advance landscape scale forest health and resilience in a very fire-prone watershed. And Circle is not the lead on this project. So 2 different examples, one they're lead, the other they're not. In this instance, the Tahoe National Forest is the lead, along with other partners are the Nature Conservancy, Blue Forest, which is a finance company or finance nonprofit, the local water district, and some others that, really the main thing, one of the main takeaways about this particular collaboration is that with Tahoe National Forest being the lead, that they are setting the timeline, and it's not, different elements of the project don't get to move at the various partners' desired timelines. Everything is very directed by what the Forest Service and the timeline that they're working on, because they're carrying more weight. They're bringing almost all of the funding to the table in this instance. But this is a very big project, very sort of long-term in its vision. Circle's role and what they're bringing to the table on this project is in facilitating. They are holding some of the funds and passing them through to different sub-awardees. They are a committee project manager, and they're helping to manage partner relationships. And so there is a link. If this is just a really cool project, if you're interested in forest health generally, but there's a link there that we can drop into the chat. We already did that. So just in closing, before we jump over to the other slides, that there are just some small steps that we can take in building our collaboration. Reminder that relationships are key. You can amplify other organizations' visibility by giving them shout outs in your newsletters and social media, giving them credit for their ideas in your reports and in your different documents, and sharing their information with prospective funders. You can help them make new connections by introducing them to your existing donors and personally volunteering with their organization. And then you can help your partners get more funding. You can share resources, you can pass along unique opportunities that are a perfect fit for what they're doing. Just some quick and easy ways to remind ourselves of how we can be building those relationships. So there's only a handful of us in the room. If we want, I can take off share and invite everyone to come on camera if you'd like. And we can take a look at those slides with the good notes on them.
We're supposed to hit like save if some people don't have access to the, what do we call this? Whiteboard or blackboard or green screen. What are these things called? The Google share screen?
Yeah.
Do we
So this is
hit save or will it automatically save after a few seconds?
It should automatically save because what we're using is just a Google slide, like a set of slides. And so we can share this, or it'll just automatically save.
So maybe
Jorie, just a quick time check. You
Yeah.
might just want to talk quickly through a couple of those. I think we've got about 4 minutes left.
Yeah, let's refresh. So what's worked well in collaborations? Clarity on the roles, reliability, expectations being set early. An outlined exit strategy, that I think is a really great addition to this conversation. Who does anyone want to expand on that? Maybe they're not with us.
I think Dr. Chalk brought that up in our group.
Okay. Yeah. Is there anything that we would want to add to this?
What did you want me to add? I'm sorry.
Oh, I had noted the outlined exit strategy. That's
Yeah.
a great addition.
Yeah, that is definitely a must have, because especially if you're in grant proposals that are longer than 18 months, you have to know that someone is committed to the duration of that project, and there will be breakpoints throughout that then an individual can say, hey, this isn't working for me. I'm getting off. This is my exit. And with that, I'll say, when you're dealing with funding, that not paying everyone all at once and they don't meet their deliverables, because it's hard to retract that money back if someone does not meet their deliverables. And so it also allows someone to have an exit strategy that they can exit the relationship gracefully if for some reason there's a circumstance beyond their control. So having an exit strategy and knowing what that exit strategy is up front, that eases people with, this may not be working for me, or I can't make the deliverables. And then whoever the lead is on that grant, they have enough time to contact their grantor to make those modifications in their contract.
Yeah, that's great. And then looking at the challenges, disagreements on the substance of how we'll approach a project, changing staff. And I've experienced changing staff also being a great bump in moving a collaboration forward. If you have staff that are not so easy to work with, but overall, I would probably agree that when staff change, it kind of throws things off for a bit, right? lack of transparency about funding and power, the values alignment. Yeah, and that's why I wanted to focus so much on trust building and bring in some of those resources.
I really feel I've just add that I feel like the funders ought to be really like making sure that this is happening from the top down, that, and I'm not necessarily seeing that, but yeah, I see a lot of funders wanting these things to happen, but they don't necessarily really point that out to the lead organizations that get the funding. And the funders don't really have, they have a lot of other requirements, but they don't necessarily have anything that really makes that prime feel responsible, would be my, especially, I mean, some are just, yeah, that's my experience.
Oh, thank you, Mary. Well, we're just about at time. I'm going to put up our final slide. Let's see here.
And while you're doing that, Jorie, I'll just say we'll have these Google Slides up for the rest of the week. In our follow-up email, you'll get a link to that. So keep adding to them to make it as a useful resource as possible.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. I hope that a few of these things that we've talked about have been useful, and feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. We've got a couple of other sessions coming up, so please keep